So this is the first edition of the world exclusive Khoodeelaar campaign, Diagnosis of Fleet Street. And when we say that, we of course include things like what Fleet Street is not reporting on generally. The most persistent theme in the Fleet Street failures to conduct its collective journalism in relation to the services owed to the ordinary people by the state, by the businesses, and by the various agencies of the state. Of course, the failures are absolutely outrageous currently in view of the fact that the UK is involved in massive propaganda about its dealing with the virus and also the deadlock created by Boris Johnson over the UK versus the European Union. The Financial Times is admitting most Britons will be barred from visiting EU countries from January the 1st, when pandemic safety rules that allow free travel within the bloc stop applying to the UK. The end of the Brexit transition period means the UK will be subject to a system that allows non-essential travel from only a handful of non-EU countries with low COVID-19 infection rates, the European Commission said. Now, this is a report from two people, one in Brussels and the other one is Oslo. So that's the main item on front page about the Brexit implications. But that item, despite the fact that it does refer to the free travel being restricted from 1st of January to the UK persons, the day-to-day impact far exceed anything like that restriction or that item about restrictions actually implies. The day-to-day impact and consequences of the UK's departure from the EU from the 1st of January 2021 will be, as current observations from various physically involved people show, that will be a paralysis in terms of the movement, because the movements and the kind of dependence by the UK, for example, consumer goods and materials, the fruits and vegetables and other items of and commodities that are used by people, that pattern that has been established over decades, that will be absolutely devastating to have halted, if you like, or interfered with by the departure. And the departure kind of rhetoric that is being promoted by Johnson and Fleet Street, well, via Fleet Street, the departure will be catastrophic to many individuals. But the Fleet Street is not actually detailing any of that. it is kind of tampering with the surface and still confining itself to shallow kind of promotions and propaganda for Boris Johnson. And the Financial Times is starting a new series on the future of the City of London as the business thing, as the financial place, rather than the City of London Corporation as a kind of unique equivalent to a borough council. And it says in the introduction to this new series, The Future of the City, when the dust settles on the UK's departure from the EU, few doubt that London will remain a major financial centre for the foreseeable future, as well as by far the largest hub in the European time zone, but there will doubtless be headwinds. Now, what does it mean by headwinds? Financiers are hunting for new business lines to add to London's globally competitive ones, such as foreign exchange and derivatives. Regardless, the city is likely to keep its doors open. Openness is hardwired into the UK's view of the financial world, says Paul Tucker, a former deputy governor of the Bank of England. He advises sticking to the basics as an open centre beyond compare for stability and integrity. Now, there is a big read on that topic on page 21 of the Financial Times today, Thursday, the 10th of December. And the headline is a question mark. Can London discover new heights? Now, this is a kind of plug for the financial interests operating from and in and via the City of London. So it's not a critical objective analysis by the Financial Times by any means. And there are individual items about the various shares and buying and selling that goes on in the market. There is a piece that actually has the item on page 4 about Emmanuel Macron, who is starting a bill targeting Islamic extremists. Now, that is misleading because it should be within quotation marks, Islamist extremists, because otherwise it conflates people who are ordinary Muslims, ordinary believers in the faith. And that is why most of Macron's racism is to be found. And there is a smaller item in the Financial Times underneath that one, which says the European Union is pushing for swift removal of online terror content. Now, the definition of terror, of course, is a received one. That is to say, it's uncritical propaganda. about what is terror and what is not. Now, there is a partial kind of antisocial item in the Financial Times, page 2, about the ban on evictions in Britain. It says under moratorium that ban on commercial evictions is extended. Now, it doesn't say in the headline the ban that has been lifted from evictions of ordinary tenants and the impact of it on lives of people, individuals and families and groups of people. And there is a completely false headline in the editorial of the Financial Times, which says that Britain is gearing up to take on the tech companies. Now, this is not something that is being done by Britain, because the role of the kind of MPs and also the select committee on the tech companies and the digital media has been absolutely abysmally incompetent and collusive. And this one is actually, this alleged move by the British to take on the tech companies is actually an imitation of what the EU is doing, as an item I have already referred to earlier in this particular edition. We shall be talking more about the contents of the Financial Times and the lack of socially responsible content in the Financial Times. And this is the picture that the Daily Mail has arranged for Boris Johnson to look like he's businesslike and he's kind of on message about the objective kind of narrative. Oh, that is the picture I'm talking about. But they are admitting the deadlock at the meeting. And it is kind of over celebrating its alleged achievement in raising £11 million for the PPE. This is the PPE, the kind of thing that has been needed by the health service staff dealing with the health service staff. And it's gloating about the top honor. It's not talking about the actual details of the kind of behavior of the virus. And then it is back on the anti kind of anti-Muslim hostility to migrants, because the Albanians mainly are Muslims. So It is saying the 69 fishing boat migrants let off in legal blunder. I mean, it's critical. The Daily Mail is critical of the kind of provision contained in many of the treaties that the UK signed up to honor the human rights of people seeking asylum and other migrants looking for kind of shelter out of the states of desperate uncertainty, hostility, genocide, hunger, and starvation that they're fleeing. So it says, it calls it a blunder. It's a critical kind of thing. Instead of Fleet Street, referring to the fact that it's a overdue kind of duty by the UK as a signatory to the various treaties, that it should not prosecute people who have not even set foot on the British soil, which is what happened with the Albanians. And there are pictures of Johnson posing for pictures with a face that is smiling. And of course, there is Starmer being reportedly ready to back Johnson, whatever Johnson does. So these are items that are typical of the Daily Mail, typical of Fleet Street. These are not substance. They don't contain the substance of what is happening in society. And there is a piece for the benefit of this woman, Tatiana Ahmedova, who is suing her son. Now she's a multimillionaires. Son in 453 million oligarch divorce says his mother had 2 affairs. And the man she has had affairs with are pictured along with the picture of her ex-husband, the Ahmedov. These men are pictured along with her. Now this is a continuation of the use of the British court system or court bureaucracy by very wealthy people from outside. Contrary to the myth that access to the British court system and the bureaucracy is available to people who are ordinary residents in Britain and who have got legitimate claims exceeding billions of pounds. So this is something that the Fleet Street papers covering the ongoing litigation between Tatiana Ahmedova and her husband and her son So there is this continuing display coverage. That is to say, it's a big piece in the Times and the Daily Mail. And neither the Times nor the Daily Mail even refers to the reality of the denial of access to the court system to millions of people in this country, millions. And as the millions are denied access to the judicial kind of bureaucracy, the claims made by the supporters of Wolf, one of the now retired kind of senior judges in the judicial bureaucracy, that his reform, access to justice, did the actual justice to the people needing access to the court system. It never did. And anyone who is vaguely familiar with the conventionally designed and stuffed spelled S-T-U-F-F-E-D, stuffed walls of a licensed law trader's office, either they be a solicitor or be a barrister, would know that these walls are stuffed with expensive looking volumes. Now that has been built up over kind of centuries in this country, in the UK. And it looks as if those volumes contain real, practical answers to the judicial duties owed to the ordinary person needing access to justice. These don't. And these actually constitute the physical barriers and obstructions to access to justice, because they contain 99% of the contents are absolutely redundant, not ever used. And if they were to be used, they would be incompatible, most of them, with the UK's obligations, as I have been saying exclusively in these broadcasts, with the treaty obligations that the UK is signed up to and has been signed up to for decades. This is different from any treaty obligations or treaty agreements and arrangements that the UK had signed as part of the European Economic Union and then the European Union. There are other and numerous conventions, agreements, charters, declarations that the UK remains signed up to and will remain signed up to. So all these volumes shown behind the licensed law trader are complete, absolute, utter rubbish. And they are breaches. They contain breaches of the majority of the conventional duties that the UK is under. And there is never any discussion, any reference to any of these anywhere. Not in Fleet Street, not in the courts themselves, not in Parliament, most certainly not in the House of Commons, and most certainly not in the so-called Oxbridge or other academic institutions allegedly about the study of the law. So what you are getting here on this program is an exclusive on all these levels and a scoop on all of these organizations and agencies. And as I've said in the last few weeks, our movement has been conducting this broadcast is a result of ongoing investigation taking place 24/7. So although I may appear to be reading no script, the contents of what I say is based on or are based on the ongoing 24/7 study and analysis. I'm making it simpler and shorter in what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So we have been investigating the actual availability of the documentation from the research outfit at the House of Commons, House of Parliament, House of Commons. We are focusing on the House of Commons. And we have found and we have been finding that they haven't got most of the information. They haven't got most of the answers to the many questions we have been having to ask about the UK's status in complying with the various requirements, obligations, and duties that the UK and any other signatory member state with a small capital S is under as a result of the fact that they are signed up to these treaties and agreements internationally. The people who are in post in the House of Commons to provide answers to questions have represented a position that they are not there to answer questions which they interpret as being outside of the remits if those questions concern questions about where it can be found as to the level of the UK's compliance with those requirements. Our questions have been focused on what acts of Parliament exist. So that is part of the work of the House of Commons or Houses of Parliament. And yet it seems to be a difficult issue for the staff to deal with. Now that difficulty is not caused by the staff members themselves necessarily, and we are being generous in this assumption. But that is part of the job description and the job specification that they are supposed to be in employment under. Now, if that is the case, then where do the members of the public, the citizens, the indigenous, the British living people in Britain people in Britain and dealing with the issues that arise, where do they look for these items or these answers to these questions? The questions being, where can we find what the United Kingdom is doing in applying its treaty obligations domestically, to domestic lawmaking, to domestic services, for example, services that are owed by the agencies, by the institutions, by the courts, bureaucracies, by the government departments, by members of parliament, by elected councillors, by generally council entities, businesses, big corporations, the regulators, Ofcom, and others, the broadcasting organizations, the BBC, Sky News, ITV, Channel 4, and so on. Where can the members of the public find the information as to what, if any, practical arrangement exists in the UK according to UK domestic legal framework, as can be traced or should be traceable by referring to the actual existence of an act of parliament or a series of acts of parliament dealing with the UK's duties under the treaty obligations. And they don't find this answer, this question, or these detailed parts of the overall question easy to handle at all. So this is coming to 12 minutes to 10 GMT in the morning of Thursday, the 10th of December, 2020. And back to this case of the mother who is alleged by her son to have had 2 affairs. And it's a piece by Vanessa Allen on the ongoing litigation in the High Court between Tatiana Ahmedova and her husband and her son. Her husband and her son, Timur Ahmedov, is taking the side of his father. And yesterday, that is Wednesday, the 9th of December 2020 in the High Court, Timur denied that he had deliberately helped his Russian oligarch father, Farhad Ahmedov, 65, to hide his vast fortune. He said his father was his role model and that he felt an immense sense of loyalty and respect for his father. By contrast, he said, he felt disgust and anger over his mother's conduct. In a written statement, Timur took the extraordinary step of laying bare his mother's relationships in detail. He said he was 7 years old when he discovered she was having an affair with his best friend's older brother, Mark Isle. The affair continued for several years until Mr. Isle found him to say that she had a new boyfriend. Timur told the court, I learned later from my friends in London that my mother was conducting another affair, this time in full public knowledge, with an art dealer called Alexander Hella. Timur grew up with his mother in a 2.5 million home in Weybridge in Surrey, in England, while his father worked abroad. His father started a relationship with a woman called Anna, and they later married and had 3 children. But while Timur said he believed his father had treated his mother well during their 20-year marriage, she had openly betrayed him in front of his children. He told the court that he had tried to rebuild their relationship after the divorce, until she launched legal action against him. The billionaire's son said he could lose his £30 million apartment in Knightsbridge if his mother wins her legal action and would be left penniless. He added, I feel that she must hate me, and after everything that I have already experienced in my childhood, this causes me an immense amount of pain and distress. Now, remember what we are reading here. He's saying that he fears he will lose his £30 million Knightsbridge home if he loses the case to his mother. And other losses he's referring to. Now, that is a written kind of statement that was obviously kind of included in the proceedings during Wednesday, the 9th of December 2020 in the High Court. Contrast that with the behavior of the persons who decided to obstruct and to invent a series of racist pretexts to obstruct the claims in the High Court against the criminals and the wrongdoers and the robbers and the looters that have caused 100 times, 1,000 times worse damages and losses to the claimants as compared to Timur Ahmedov. As reported in the Daily Mail, that is, as his claims of losses are reported in the Daily Mail today on page 9 of the Daily Mail of Thursday, the 10th of December 2020, written by Vanessa Allen. Now, he says that he has already experienced many painful and distressing things in his life due to his mother's behavior. And if you multiply that by 1,000 times, you can begin to see the indescribable nature of the pain and losses and sufferings that the High Court has been obstructing from being judicially examined and investigated. And this is an ongoing issue. And the reason why I have been reading this in full is in order to keep updating on the ongoing issues. And they all refer to what we have been calling the attacks on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane. The Kitten's house represents billions of times more worth and value than the two words affectionately used, but the two words generally would represent. They are more than the welfare of the kittens. The welfare of the kittens are absolutely paramount part of the claims, but also the implications and the impact on other aspects of the targets of the attacks by the criminals in collusion with Tower Hamlets Council, and as a result of the corruption and criminality of the Spitalfields Small Business Association and the criminals operating that outfit through the Spitalfields SSBA Community Trust. And aided and abetted by the policy, a racist policy, no doubt, of the prosecuting authorities in this country, and of course by the Director of Public Prosecutions. Remember, in 2011, when Starmer was still 2 years to stay as Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer was contacted several times with exact information about criminal activities being plotted against the targets in Brick Lane. And Starmer never acted on the information, nor did any of the persons under his controlling command at the Crown Prosecution Service in England. And the attacks that were being planned and the targets of the attacks, as I have been saying, affected and entailed and involved 1,000 times more value and implication than what is represented here in this case. The case, let's say, we shall call by the name of the main claimant now, Tatiana Ahmedova, against her son and her ex-husband. And it goes on to say that earlier this week, that is probably Tuesday she is referring to, earlier this week, lawyers for Mrs. Ahmedova branded Timur a compulsive liar. He denied he had lied, but admitted he had made errors of judgment. Timur said his father had transferred millions of pounds to him, but said the money was intended for him to invest. He said he had pleaded with his mother to accept a generous out-of-court settlement to drop the case, but claimed his mother had refused because she could not afford to pay her legal bills. Now, this is again a question of who can afford and who can be allowed and who is allowed the use of or access to the High Court in London. If it is true, and it's a big if, that she could not afford her legal bills, how is it that she is at this stage? I mean, this has been going on for quite a long time. Who is paying her legal bills? And the answer is that company that she has had a kind of arrangement with, that is funding for divorce, that is a company that funds legal actions under the banner of divorce. That is what is probably the answer. Let's see the next paragraph. Mrs. Ahmedova filed for divorce in 2013, citing her husband's unreasonable behavior and a number of affairs by him. She has previously admitted she had an affair with Mr. Isle when he was 19 and she was 28. She has not commented on Timur's claims about her relationship with Mr. Hela, who did not respond to a request for comment, request made by the Daily Mail, presumably. Mrs. Ahmedova told the court this week that she had not wanted to take legal action against her son, but felt it was her only option after pursuing her ex-husband in court for 4 years. The case continues now. That is a very long time. The actual court pursuit for 4 years. That is worth a lot of money owed to and claimed by the licensed law traders, whoever they are. So how is this being funded? Because our movement has been engaged in battles with the various courts in the legal bureaucracy. And at every stage, from the magistrates court to the high court and to the Supreme Court as well, because we have been in correspondence with the Supreme Court, our movement, there is a pattern of obstruction. And that obstruction is in defiance of the UK's obligations under the treaties that the UK remains actively signed up to. So we shall be talking more about this, and we shall be referring to and updating on this one and similar other cases and other examples of the High Court and the judicial bureaucracy behaving illegally, unlawfully, unconstitutionally, racistly, and prejudicially. And this is the 2-page spread about the Sky News. Let's see what is going on in the Sky News, and the Daily Mail is doing this. And it says that there is a tweet that has been copied from someone called John Law, who tweeted, "Look at the state of Sky News. The morons spent all summer preaching to us, and now look at them. After illegally going on a bender, that is on a drinking spree, that is people who go on an excessive alcohol drinking spree and visit more than one public house." So it says, after illegally going on a bender, they were going to go to hospital to put lives at risk. Now that is the tweet that has been included in this coverage of the piece about the Sky News political editor Beth Rigby going off air. And the piece says, 4 senior members of the staff have been taken off air by Sky News in the wake of presenter Kay Barley's 60th birthday party. Political editor Beth Rigby, who has regularly grilled ministers on the coronavirus crisis throughout the pandemic, is now, like Miss Barley, expected to go unseen, while the broadcaster, that is Sky News, conducts an internal investigation into whether the party, that is the pub party, marking the 60th birthday or anniversary of Kay Barley, broke COVID rules. Miss Barley's fellow presenter, Samantha Washington, and North of England correspondent Inzamam Rashid have also been hauled off air. Miss Barley's Sky career is now thought to be hanging in the balance. She was forced to apologize on Monday night for an error in judgment, and claimed she had inadvertently broke the rules after a night out in London, which is in Tier 2. Miss Barley dined at the Century Club in Soho, along with Miss Rigby, Miss Washington, Mr. Rashid, and 6 other colleagues. It is understood that the group dined outside and sat across 2 different tables to comply with the current rules. Miss Rigby, who is not thought to have broken any COVID rules, went home after the dinner, but Miss Barley and some others walked across Soho to the restaurant Folly. Miss Barley claims she popped in after the 10 p.m. curfew to use the loo. Some of the group are then said to have gone on to Miss Barley's home to continue the party, something strictly prohibited by the Tier 2 rules on socializing indoors. Sky presenter Adam Bolton appeared to reveal his stance yesterday after sharing, then deleting, one observer's tweet which described those who attended the party before a planned TV report from hospital as morons. Now, we have said on the facts for the umpteenth nth time that most of the people who write the stuff in the Fleet Street papers are ignorant, stupid, and of course prejudiced and biased. Morons is a word that we have used, but not every time. Now, in the Daily Mail, they are referring to the Sky News persons named as morons. And we have said that the mainstream media is peddling lies and untruths, not about this particular kind of personal embarrassment that they have been caught in, but about society, about politics, about the various aspects of the duties being flouted by the government on everything. And we have said on the evidence, on the facts, that the reason why the virus crisis, the pandemic, was allowed to take so many lives in Britain, and let's just confine to Britain for the time being, although the experience of the British state or the evidence of the behavior of the British state in protecting the people in Britain from this pandemic can be evidentially extrapolated to apply to the USA and to many of the Western European countries, especially to Sweden, where the initial kind of contradictory message coming from Sweden has now been exposed as a sham and as having been founded on stupidity and ignorance and moronic ignorance. Because the virus cannot, it's a physical thing. It's a thing in the atmosphere, in the environment, by all descriptions. So this virus cannot discriminate as based on nationality or anything like that. So if the virus was spreading across the countries next to Sweden, it would inevitably spread across Sweden. And in the same way, unless, of course, the virus is a living thing sent out to attack Donald Trump, who says it's a Chinese thing, as if the Chinese have sent it to him. Of course, it is not. It may have been discovered in China first. But how could the Chinese be accused of inventing it for the rest of the world, because they have themselves been affected? So the media in Britain, Fleet Street, is lying because it is not yet talking about this. And it's not talking about how the virus actually behaves from A to Z. That is the phrase I've been using. And the overhyped vaccine is overhyped, is being overhyped. Because the vaccine, if it is administered for the first time only this week, how can they say that it's 100% or 95% good or effective or safe? How can they say that? Because it has not been any time, not even a week has passed. And the Daily Mail is as much failing as the others. And they're saying on the same page, page 11, pages 10 and 11 are devoted to the Sky News and the London vaccine. And here is a warning that is exactly what I have been referring to, but this is reluctantly given any space by the Daily Mail on page 12. Vaccine allergy alert. So there is an allergy alert accompanying the vaccine. This vaccine is safe for most, it says. But watchdog issues warning over medical history after NHS staff have adverse reaction. So there is absolutely no basis for gloating by the Daily Mail and the Boris Johnson supporting Boris Graf and the Beaverbrook poisonous liar Daily Express or the Murdoch scum gloating about the vaccine. Remember what we have said about the UK being held ransom by the big business criminals. And the fact that Keir Starmer is colluding with Johnson and not providing even a semblance of a democratic demand for accountability by the Conservative. Now, there is an admission in this Daily Mail, 2-page spread, which admission exposes the Daily Mail's lying every day, even when they're covering this contradictory kind of contents. But this one is about the Tory peer, the Peruvian tycoon, accused of laundering cocaine profits and a £50 million PPP bonanza, the most staggering example yet of how a lucky few cashed in as ministers through millions of COVID contracts. So that's what it is about. The vaccine is, and the other kind of. And this is a piece by this guy called David Rose. Now, David Rose, of course, we have discussed before. Lord Chadlington, insert the Camerons and the David and Lizzie Sumner. Below Peruvian Patriarch Orlando Sanchez Paredes. The bulletproof truck trundled down the road in downtown Lima, which is in Peru, guarded by 18 policemen. They were wearing body armor and wielding high-velocity rifles. No one was taking any chances. This was a special delivery for Peruvian prosecutor George Cotrina. His next case, the fruits of a mammoth investigation by the elite Dirandro unit, the anti-drug directorate, a document they carefully brought to him back in March 2011, ran to more than 1,000,000 pages. Their target, a prominent local clan, the Sanchez Paredes family. The news electrified Peru, for the business interests of the Sanchez Paredes are vast, running to luxury hotels, factories, farms, cattle ranches, and 15 gold mines. With their wealth have come fame and political influence. Now, these are the people connected with the conservatives. David Cameron. And these are the people, this family has been given a contract on the COVID so-called vaccine. So Fleet Street is still not telling the truth, even when it is appearing to be. And anyone who is new to this may be surprised to read our statement that the NHS, the so-called National Health Service, created to shield people at the point of need, has been also allowing mass murders of elderly people. Now, if it is the elderly people that they have been murdering, what is the evidence that they have not been murdering others? And there is this piece by this person who is correctly saying that it's inhuman, but the point is that they do not resuscitate kind of orders are completely criminal orders. That is crimes. Any order like that constitutes a crime of murder. And the Guardian and the Daily Mirror and others have been choosing to be in denial about these murders. And the Daily Mail's Stephen Glover is again doing a kind of typically Daily Mail corruption and backhanded kind of morality. It is attacking both the kind of environmental campaigners as well as the so-called rich and privileged. So there is a victory for racism at Oxbridge. Cambridge University dons voted for tolerance after a row that split university. It's a piece by Josh White, education reporter, saying academics voting on a new free speech policy at Cambridge University have rejected demands that views remain respectful, fearing this could crush freedom of expression. Now, there is an accidental piece in the Daily Mail. Accidental because it's not part of the Daily Mail's kind of ordinary style of journalism or editorial choice. Stop saying sentences are too soft, it says. The country's most senior judge yesterday demanded an end to criticism of the judiciary for handing serious criminals soft sentences. The Lord Chief Justice's comments followed discontent among ministers over the jail terms given to the killers who murdered PC Andrew Harper. And this Lord Chief Justice is called Barnett, said ignorant attacks on the penalties set by judges are corrosive and harmful. He added, please avoid the knee-jerk criticism of a judge for applying the law and guidelines when they produce a sentence the commentator wishes were more severe. The demand in a speech to lawyers follows protests over these sentences handed to 3 teen burglars who killed PC Harper in Berkshire last year. He suffered catastrophic injuries after his ankles got caught in a strap attached to the getaway car. Driver Henry Long was jailed for 16 years, and accomplices Albert Bowers and Jesse Cole for 13 years after they were convicted of manslaughter. Well, for a start, this is a wrong attitude by the judge. And we shall be commenting on the various things wrong in that statement attributed to him later, either in this part or in another part. Back to this cocaine death of this British woman, teacher 42, who was working in Dubai, but was smuggling a 60-pound bag of cocaine, which she swallowed at Manchester airport just before flying back to Dubai. She wanted to hide it, but the bag burst inside her stomach. She was a teacher, aged 42, working in Dubai, and she was smuggling cocaine. Speaks for itself, but we shall be elaborating on this another time or another part. All right, so this is the thing that again we have covered, but the Daily Mail is not reporting this about every part of the country where it's happening. So we're diagnosing the Daily Mail as being stupid, ignorant, irresponsible, failing to tell the truth about police forces being actively engaged in illegally banning crimes. Is a police force failing to log 220 crimes a day? Manchester service letting victims down? More than 200 crimes a day have been going unrecorded by England's second largest police force, a damning report says. We shall be talking about that again more. And there is this piece in the Daily Mail. So there is a piece in the Daily Mail on page 27, headline Chinese Matahari's honey trap mission to woo top politicians. Corridors of Power Congressman Eric Swalwell with Fang. The Fang is the woman, suspected Chinese spy, Fang, also known as Christine Fang. A suspected Chinese spy acted as a honey trap to lure American politicians into bed in the hope of infiltrating the corridors of power, intelligence officials believe. Fang, also known as Christine Fang, arrived as a student in California and spent the next 4 years wooing men across the political spectrum, they claim. She had sex with one city mayor in his car while under the watch of the FBI, it was alleged, while another local leader introduced her to colleagues as his girlfriend, Fang, who left the United States suddenly in mysterious circumstances, even raised funds for two former presidential contenders. One of them, Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat member of an influential government intelligence committee, refused to say yesterday whether he had sex with her, claiming their relationship was classified. Fang, dubbed the Chinese Mata Hari after the Dutch exotic dancer who spied for Germany during the First World War, arrived in the US in 2011 as a university student, according to the news website Axios. At the time, she was believed to have been in her late 20s or early 30s and appeared well off as she drove a white Mercedes. She abruptly vanished in 2015 when the FBI started to investigate her and has not been seen in the US since. It is thought she is back in China. And the FBI reportedly know of at least two mayors who had romantic relationships with her for about 3 years, seemingly at the same time. So she is corrupting mayors two at the same time and giving us material to insist on calling the elected mayor post a corrupting post. Which takes us in this part A, to the corrupt behavior during the 6 calendar years of Lutfur Rahman's being incumbent in the corrupting post of elected mayor. Now, the behavior of Lutfur Rahman during the 6 calendar years from October 2010 until 23rd of April 2015, when Richard Morey, the election commissioner, declared Lutfur Rahman's election on 22nd of May 2014 as void, that is to say, as not having been held at all. Now, during the 6 years until that time, the 6 calendar years until that time, Lutfur Rahman was in post officially. And our campaign, and I myself personally, we have been opposed to that post, corrupt post. But at the same time, because it was operated as being officially ongoing, we have been addressing legally, strictly legally and evidentially, demands and treating the corrupting post as part of the local council. And so the demands have been addressed to the local council, whether it is or it was being represented or deemed to be represented or deemed to be headed by the executive mayor post holder. And the details of the demands are contained in the details of the communications, and those communications refer to the details of the targets of the criminals' attack launched at the Kitten's house in Brick Lane, and the contents of the attacks, the impacts of the attack, and the largest known numbers of personnel involved in carrying out, in plotting the attacks. And all of these was made known to Lutfur Rahman throughout the period of the 6 calendar years. And I began making it known to Lutfur Rahman in that cycle, that is the cycle of his being incumbent in October 2010. I first spoke to Lutfur Rahman in Brick Lane on Friday, the 29th of October 2010. Outside, just outside the Brick Lane Mosque. In the afternoon, shortly after the Friday congregation prayers. So the actual behavior of the incumbent post holder as, quote, elected mayor, Lutfur Rahman, during the 6 calendar years. The behavior was persistently one of abuse of that post. And the abuse was made worse by the silence of Lutfur Rahman. As Robert Neal, Conservative MP, pointed out in a small debate he either initiated or took part in about the role of the local borough councils, so-called monitoring officers. Isabella Freeman, who was the monitoring officer in the name of Tower Hamlets Council, throughout the majority of the calendar year, 6 calendar years, that Lutfur Rahman was in post as the incumbent so-called elected mayor. According to Robert Neil, MP, Isabella Freeman advised Tower Hamlets Council against Lutfur Rahman being kind of made to speak to the council answering questions. According to Robert Neil, Isabella Freeman said that Lutfur Rahman would suffer detriment to his human rights if he spoke in the council. Think about that. That was 10, 11, 12, 13, the 4th calendar year when Robert Neil spoke in that debate in January 2013. And this was a debate that Robert Neil spoke in. Let's see the actual. Now, the Daily Telegraph well, the Andrew Gilligan in the Daily Telegraph on the dated the 23rd of January 2013 wrote this: among the most interesting members of the dreadful crew around Lutfur Rahman, the extremist linked executive mayor of Tower Hamlets, is Tower Hamlets Council's assistant chief executive, a woman called Isabella Freeman. Now, the picture that Andrew Gilligan's piece contained was probably one that wasn't taken by Andrew Gilligan. Most likely the one taken by Ted Jury. But Andrew Gilligan doesn't credit Ted Jury as being the photographer. So we just reproduce this in the Khoodeelaar account on the WordPress blog in January 2013. So Andrew Gilligan continues, she is one of the borough's shrinking band of senior white officials who has not been sacked or decided to leave. Now, that reference to the shrinking band of white officials is something very important we should be discussing in updates further later. Continuing this piece without that update, last year, that is 2012, remember it was the 2012 attack on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane that we have been talking about in the context of Lutfur Rahman's collusion with the criminals. So last year, that is 2012, it can now be revealed both Labour and Conservative members of Tower Hamlets Council overwhelmingly passed a motion recommending disciplinary action against freemen. Now, disciplinary action against Isabella Freeman was passed as a motion by the Conservatives and the Labour. Conservatives are only few of them anyway. So it's mainly the Labour Party councillors that did that, kind of did the running in that motion. And what is happening is that despite the fact that she was being under pressure from the council itself for her misconduct, she stayed on, and there is a detail that we have read before, but I mean, she kind of broke her own kind of codes, if you like. And Andrew Gilligan says that Isabella Freeman is responsible for the standards regime, the code of conduct for Tower Hamlets councillors. Last week, says Gilligan, in the House of Commons under parliamentary privilege, the former local government minister Bob Neill told how Freeman and Lutfur supporters have abused the standards regime to hound the mayor's opponents and protect him, bringing it into serious disrepute. Anti-Lutfur councillors, including the Labour leader Josh Peck, Labour leader on the Tower Hamlets Council at the time, that is, at the time of this piece being published in the Telegraph by Andrew Gilligan in January 2013. Josh Peck, his predecessor Halal Abbas, and the Tory leader Peter Golds have said Neil been subject to a history of vexatious complaints by Rahman supporters, and placed under costly and time-consuming investigations by Freeman for Kafkaesque supposed offenses, which amount in essence to doing what many people would regard as their duty. What Neil called the most frankly scandalous example involves me. That is what Andrew Gilligan is saying about himself. Gilligan is saying to the readers, you may remember that that is Gilligan's interest in Tower Hamlets began in March 2010, when he made a Channel 4 Dispatches documentary describing how Lutfur Rahman won the then council leadership with the help of the IFE. That is an organization that is called Islamic Forum Europe, but that is not spelled out in that way. An extremist Islamic group which wants to turn Britain into a Sharia state. For a full list of Lutfur's controversies, see here, there is a link there, which is not possible to be linked from this piece. One of Lutfur's key actions after taking control was to appoint a man with close links to the IFE, Lutfur Ali, etc. Now let's talk about the other bits that I have read already from the Andrew Gilligan January 2013 piece in the Telegraph. That Isabella Freeman was hounding critics of Lutfur Rahman on the council as well as Andrew Gilligan with all kinds of complaints and investigations and costly kind of processes and inquiries. It was at that time that I was very actively trying to get Lutfur Rahman to stop the ongoing criminality linked to the attacks on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane in 2012. And the other attacks, the other acts of negligence concerning the whole array of duties neglected by the Tower Hamlets Council were being allowed to remain unacted on by Lutfur Rahman. So I was in contact with Lutfur Rahman personally by sending him messages, but I was in contact with his nominated de facto closest kind of ally and advisor, Alibor Chowdhury, more frequently than I was in contact with Lutfur Rahman. Although Lutfur Rahman already had admitted to having kind of heard my serious concerns on 4 occasions up to that date, and although he had admitted in front of Alibor Chowdhury and a dubiously paid advisor called Muhammad Jubair, that evidence was witnessed on the 20th of September 2012 in a restaurant called Marco's, which is no longer in action in business in New Road, but it was in the basement of that restaurant called Marco's, situated in New Road, London E1, on the 20th of September 2012. Lutfur Rahman offered a long list of statements or claims, saying that I was the one who was the best suited, best able person, should have been the first. What he meant was the Bangladeshi community member of parliament in the UK parliament, not him. And I should have been the mayor, not him. And he said accompanying things consistent with that statement. So that was a date on the list of dates when I communicated to Lutfur Rahman the clear statement of evidence based on evidence, ongoing evidence of misconduct and criminality by employed paid employees in place at the time in Tower Hamlets Council, including Colin Cormack. And although I didn't go into all the names, that statement that I made to Lutfur Rahman to act on my advice, by implication and in context, and in very closely related series of events and facts and connections included the criminal racist liar Steve Hill. So all the evidence that I submitted to the council post holders were known to Lutfur Rahman, and all the information that I gave to Alibor Chaudhry, I checked and double checked by asking Alibor Chaudhry regularly, consistently, this question: are you telling the truth, Alibor? He said yes. And have you explained everything I have told you to Lutfur Rahman? Alibor said yes. I said, have you given him the full facts as I have told you? And Alibor said yes. And I said, has Lutfur Rahman said anything denying in law on the facts the council's responsibilities pertaining to each and every aspect of the detailed evidential matters ongoing? And Alibor said, Lutfur Rahman never denied any of those. I said, what has Lutfur Rahman done in response to these communications, these evidence? And Alibor said words to the effect that Lutfur Rahman was doing everything to solve all the outstanding issues and problems and to stop the damages and the denials and the obstructions. So what is the kind of sum total of what Lutfur Rahman did? In that speech that Andrew Gilligan mentioned, the speech that Bob Neal delivered in the House of Commons in January 2013, Robert Neal abused her position, as did Lutfur Rahman, the position in the council, and they abused the council, abused the powers that should never have been abused. And Andrew Gilligan gives details of how Isabella Freeman treated a complaint made by one of Lutfur Rahman's supporters against Peter Golds for allegedly infringing Lutfur Ali's right to privacy in this interview. The interview that Peter Golds was a part of, the interview panel that was set up for the recruitment of Lutfur Ali. At enormous public expense, Isabella Freeman hired an investigator to pursue this preposterous, bewhiskered claim with a full panoply of interviews, witnesses, statements. But they ignored Andrew Gilligan himself. Is the key witness. And Gilligan says he asked Tower Hamlets Council why it was spending thousands of pounds to defend a long-gone employee who was forced out for essentially cheating the council, especially since Lutfur Ali himself had never complained either to the council itself or to Channel 4. Then Gilligan says he asked why this investigation was being launched so long after the supposed offense had taken place. And he asked why, given something Gold said to him, that is Gilligan, was the basis of the complaint, the investigator had made so little effort to contact Gilligan himself. Now this is corruption. This is corruption on a completely brazen scale and level. And contrast Lutfur Rahman's lying to me and his lying communications to me made by Alibor Chaudhry almost every single week. If there was any week that went by without any communications being forced by me on Alibor Chaudhry as the kind of stated, authorized person on behalf of Lutfur Rahman, then it would have been only due to either Alibor Chaudhry being unwell or any holiday or break in the communications caused by not me, but by other events that were not within ordinary control. But the emergency, the urgency of each of the serious issues that were affected by the kind of series of attacks contained in the attack on the Kitten's house, the implication and the impact of the damage that went going on. And there were 1,000 times more substantial and more urgent and more within the proper duties of a council than anything that Andrew Gilligan had done, which was being pursued by Isabella Freeman in direct complicity with Lutfur Rahman as part of the open brazen abuse of the name of the council, the facilities of the council. And the same thing perversely applies to the complaint that Lutfur Rahman and Isabella Freeman invented together on the pretext of Lutfur Ali's private kind of information being violated. Now, the various employees in the legal section of Tower Hamlets Council, all of them named in detail extensively, all the employees either behaved dishonestly, employees meaning the persons who are in post as some kind of licensed law traders, not the administrative staff, because I shall qualify the reason why the distinction. All the employees, the licensed law traders in the legal section, with the exception of Melanie Clay, who has died, and it is mainly because of her having passed away that I'm not going to refer to her personally in detail. All the others, the so-called licensed law traders, in paid posts, permanent posts in Tower Hamlets Council as employees, they are on the records as having lied. And this is an exclusive. This report is being updated as part of the exclusive series of reports. And the details, as I said, are contained already in the communications.